Welcome to the Thrive with OMU Podcast, where each week I'll chat with an amazing entrepreneur on their growth journey. They'll be sharing this with us to help and encourage us to take that bold step. Hello, everyone. It's yet another Friday, and I have with me this very interesting gentleman. I'm actually scared speaking with him. His name is called Harvey. He's a highly sought after speaker, coach, and business communications consultant. That was my first attraction to him because I always want to learn how to communicate. But something more intriguing about Scott is that he used to be, he's a former FBI trained hostage negotiator and public information officer. So Scott knows what it means to speak up when lives are on the line. He's passionate about helping others build the skills and confidence to move off the sidelines and lead the conversation. Trust me, I'm going to maintain contact with Scott because who is in business and doesn't want to know how to lead the conversation. Scott can still be found giving his heart and wisdom to help teens navigate communicating in an online world. And you must agree with me that with the teens, communication is really, really important in these days where every word has been shortened to a 3-letter word. And to prevent tragedy before it happens, you literally have to create a new dictionary to communicate with the teens. This is something he became passionate about in his years as a DARE, D-A-R-E officer. He lives in central Kentucky with his wife of over 25 years and his 2 daughters. Scott, I am so excited to have you on my podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to this.
Thank you. Thank you, Scott. So you wrote a book. Before we talk about you writing a book, what were you doing before you wrote the book?
That's a great question. And I started my law enforcement career way back in 1998. I'm old, that's who I am. I don't apologize for being old because it beats the alternative. And so I started my career in 98 in the police department. And I thought that was going to allow me to help people by, arresting the people who are making the poor choices and helping the people who are making good choices. And what I found out is I'm not good on cleanup. I don't like coming in after the tragedy and trying to put the pieces back together. So I got involved in the prevention end of law enforcement. So that means I got into the classroom with the students and I started teaching them how to make better choices. That's what I did in the DARE program. And then I got involved with the adults in the community and I started running our Citizens Police Academy to teach them what we did at the police department. And I got involved very early on as a hostage negotiator because I realized as a kid, I was a middle child. I had 2 brothers who've never been wrong about a thing in their whole life and love a good argument, those 2. And so I was the middle child, the peacekeeper who could kind of negotiate between the 2 and work things out with them. And I just knew I was a fairly good communicator. So the hostage negotiation allowed me to step in a time of crisis and really help somebody find a workable solution for them. Now, what they didn't realize is that was the solution I needed them to choose. But I knew that was their best way out of their situation. They didn't plan this. It's just something that happened, and now they don't know what to do. So let's give them a way out that allows them to save some face, allows us to preserve life and property, because that's what we wanted to do. And the negotiation became kind of a mental chess match for me. How do I get people to go to their best solution and make them think it's their idea? Well, that's what we do every day in business. I launched my speaking business in 2010 while still working at the police department. And I was using vacation days to travel the country and talk mostly to students. Today, it's corporations, businesses. I facilitate masterminds. I do one-on-one coaching because I just want to help people communicate more effectively. because I believe firmly no organization and no individual will ever rise above their ability to effectively communicate. If you have hit a ceiling in doing what you're doing, I would almost guarantee you it's a communication issue.
Absolutely.
You feel like you're saying things, you feel like you're getting, but nobody's responding. Well, if nobody's responding, then have you really communicated in a way that they can process it? And because of my frustrations in coming out of the police world, we communicated our way through crises. That's what we did. In the business world, when a crisis hits, people are so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they end up shutting down communication. And that's the most damaging thing we can do. If you and I are friends, OMU, and all of a sudden you stop talking to me, I'm going to assume I did something wrong. I'm going to assume I have hurt you somehow, you're mad at me or something, when maybe you just got busy. Maybe you lost my contact information. There's lots of reasons for that. But when you shut down communication, when we shut down, the people we've been communicating with will start filling in the blanks on their own, and it'll be way worse than what the actual problem is. So I wrote the book to help people communicate through any situation.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Talking about hostage negotiation, I kind of find that scary.
Yeah. Why is that? What scares you about it, OMU?
So I'm imagining negotiating with I don't want to call them criminals, because you're innocent until proven guilty.
Correct.
I can imagine that at the time of negotiation, tempers are high, you don't particularly know who you're dealing with, emotions are all over the place. I'll just be scared that someone might fly off the handle.
Yeah. And I appreciate your being careful of your words, because the way I saw them in my mind is just not criminals, but people who made a poor choice, which
Absolutely.
makes them, OMU, a lot like me, because I make poor choices every day. Now, it may not be as bad as the choice they made that got them into that situation, but it's still a poor choice. So we can either continue to make poor choices and go down that pathway, or we can start realizing, hey, I messed up. How do I fix this going forward? Like, I wouldn't have designed the situation I'm in if I'm a hostage taker or if I'm in a barricaded situation. I didn't plan this. It just happened. So now what do we do? And our tempers flying in the beginning? Absolutely. Their world is crashing down. Like, they realize whatever they were trying to do, it didn't happen. And now they're stuck in a situation where they feel like they can't escape. And that is a great way to get people to lash out, people to become violent, that type of stuff. So one of the first things we did, OMU, and what I tell business leaders, when you have an employee in crisis, when you have a team member in crisis, when there's a crisis within your facility, you need time for that person to vent. You need time to let that person just say what they're thinking without really responding on our part. Because when I got on the phone with the hostage taker or the barricaded individual, they're going to yell at me. They're going to cuss at me. They're going to threaten me. They're going to threaten my family.
Yeah,
I just let that
that's
go.
The scary part.
Yeah, but you know what? That's not personal. Mike, they're really stressed. If you have kids, if your listeners have kids, we have all in the middle of stress yelled at our kids, and 5 minutes later, immediately regretted it. Because in the stress of the situation, we just had enough and we lashed out. But that's not really who we are. Who we are as an individual is a loving, caring parent who got stressed, and stress made us do something we wish we hadn't. This person, generally speaking, doesn't talk to people that way all the time. So if I can help them process the stress and let them yell and let them get it out, then they become more communicative. Think of it this way, OMU. This is the most valuable thing I ever learned as a hostage negotiator. In everybody's brain is a teeter-totter, okay? On one end of that teeter-totter is logic and reason, and on the other end is emotion. So here's the problem. When emotion goes up, logic and reason go down, which means when we're really angry, really stressed, really frustrated, we can't process logic. Our brain won't let us. As I let them yell and scream and vent, then that emotion comes down, because it takes a lot of energy to stay that emotional. As that emotion comes down, logic and reason start to come up. This is why, OMU, when you've been really stressed of one situation or another, somebody has offered you a very logical solution to that situation. And you blew right past it. Like you
You're not
didn't even register.
listening. You're not
Yeah,
even
you didn't even listen. And like 30 minutes later, you're sitting there thinking about it. You're like, you know what they said
That
is a
makes
really
sense.
good idea. That makes sense. You just couldn't process it. It wasn't personal. The emotion was so high. Logic and reason weren't invited to the party. So if we can let emotion come down, logic and reason will come back up. And that starts with just asking open-ended questions, letting people talk, not getting defensive. That's hard to do in a leadership position. You feel like they're attacking you. We want to defend. But I promise you this, when I've been stressed, the first few things out of my mouth are not the problem. The problem is deeper than that. So if we ask good questions, we'll get to the problem and we'll be able to solve it, which is what we all want.
Wow. Wow. So let's go to your book. I
Yes.
like the sound of the book. And it's funny because the name of the book, I took away silent skills.
Mm-hmm.
And it could mean a lot of things. So the minute I saw silent skills, I had done a training where I was telling the people that I was training that they needed to learn to speak up and they needed to learn to ask. As I probed further into your silent skills, it meant much more than what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So why did you come up with silent skills?
It's a great question. And it's when you write a book, sometimes you're in the middle of it and you can't see the whole picture because you're buried in the details. And honestly, the title came out of a mastermind that I facilitate. I was kicking around ideas with my mastermind participants. And one of them said, it sounds to me like what you're saying is silent skills. And when she said that, I'm like, that's exactly what I'm saying, because what I was telling them was when we shut down communication, it can kill our business. It can kill relationships. If my wife and I, after 25 years, just decide to stop talking to each other, the marriage won't last. The silence will kill that relationship. Silence is the thing that is stopping people from getting better, and society, I would say, from getting better, because we are dealing with things like we're dealing with racial tension, with poverty issues. And for some reason, we've decided we can't talk about that. Now, here's why we've decided that, because we're really afraid of offending people, which I understand. I don't want to offend people. But here's what I know. If I dance around a topic without addressing it head on, that's actually more offensive. If
and
you
actually
and I
more harmful.
Say again, I'm sorry.
And actually more harmful.
It is more harmful because it feels like I don't care. If you and I are in a relationship and there's a strain that I feel, the most loving thing I can do is say, hey, what's going on? I feel like there's a tension here. How do we talk about this? If you are a team member of mine, if I'm your supervisor, I need to start that conversation with saying, I want you to be successful here. In order to do that, we have to have a difficult conversation. I'm not trying to offend you. If I do, please let me know, because that's not what I want. I want at the end of this for us to be better than we were before this conversation started. And I feel like, OMU, we can't heal anything that we can't effectively talk about. So
yes,
we've got to stop being silent. Silence is killing every area of our life. Now, it's hard to have difficult conversations, but it's the most loving thing that I can do.
Aside from people avoiding confrontation or avoiding, I've mentioned confrontation. Besides people avoiding to rub people off wrongly, what else do you think is the reason why people keep silent these days?
So fear is the big one. Fear is the thing that keeps people from communicating effectively.
Fear of what?
Fear of saying the wrong thing. Because in today's culture, we're quick to cancel people. We're quick to find something they said, something they did. We blast it out on social media and we just cancel them. We are all capable of misspeaking, but we're afraid of saying the wrong thing. And so we say nothing, which you've already said actually does more damage. Because when I'm silent, that comes across as apathy. it feels like I don't care. If you are talking about something and you inadvertently say the wrong thing, I can say, you know what, they're just uneducated about this issue, so I need to educate them. And that doesn't happen on social media. It just doesn't. Education happens.
Everyone is quick to judge.
Oh, I know. And life transformation happens in face-to-face conversations.
Yeah.
If you can't get in the same room with people, which is always my first choice, then what we're doing right now, OMU, a video conference, is the solution.
Oh, yes.
Because it gets the emotion behind the message.
Yeah.
If all I'm getting on social media is your text, I'm missing most of the context and how you're saying it.
Yeah.
So fear is the biggest barrier today.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's sad. That's sad. That's sad. What would you say is, we've talked about silence being the problem and, the different problems that silence could cause. And you've also said that people are afraid of having those difficult conversations. You've also told us why it's important. How would you approach, say you have a client now, or with your experience, because obviously there's no way you would have worked as a hostage negotiator and not have had difficult conversations.
Yes.
So can you share a bit how, because I'm one of those that actually run away from difficult conversations, and to be quite honest, thinking back, I've never thought of why I do. Now that you've said it, I realize that it's actually fear. And for me, it's fear of just confronting the issue, fear of argument. I don't want to argue with you. I don't want to rub you off wrongly. And then I keep quiet. And actually, like you said, a lot of times the relationship becomes strained because I haven't had that conversation I was meant to have. So what would you say is the best way to go about having those difficult conversations?
So, Omo, I'm a lot like you. I actually don't like conflict. I am not one who seeks out an argument. I just don't like conflict. I tend to avoid conflict. But here's how I get over that with me. If it's somebody who is a team member, an employee, somebody I'm coaching, if I don't have the difficult conversations, it will have issues down the road. It will cause serious issues down the road. And if I genuinely care about this person, which if they're on my team, I work with them, I'm in relationship with them, then I care about them. If I care about them, the most loving thing I can do is catch it early. The most loving thing I can do is course correct early on. When you're driving a car, you tend to do minor corrections all down the road, instead of waiting until you run off the road and jerking the wheel back on and scaring everybody in the car, right? We make minor course corrections and nobody even notices. If you're on my team and I see you straying off course, getting to a point where you could cause damage to yourself, the company, our reputation, whatever, I'm going to come up to you and say, where are you heading? And how can I help you get there? Because maybe they've found a different route that I didn't think of. If I have given them a task, if they're a good employee, I'm going to give them a task, I'm going to let them go with it, unless they show me they don't know the way. If they don't know the way, then I will go with them and we'll find the way together. But if I feel like they're going in a place that's not going to be good or healthy, then I need to let them know that. I need to say, here's what I've learned when I've been down there. And you can share experiences when you have made poor choices. You can share your experiences to let them know where this is heading. But it feels confrontational. We have to reframe it as say, this is actually the most caring thing I can do. One of my favorite quotes by a guy named Dave Ramsey, he says, to be unclear is to be unkind. The kindest thing I can do is communicate very clearly what I expect and what your best outcome here is going to be. And if you're not reaching that, if I choose to ignore that because I don't want to have a difficult conversation, I'm actually setting you up to fail, which is not kind at all. So it feels unkind to have the difficult conversation. But when I play it out 3 or 4 months from now and I know where this is heading, it's super unkind to watch them blow up their career, to watch them make a mistake they can't recover from very quickly. When we could recover from this mistake really easily today, 6 months from now, we may not get it back. So it's the most loving thing I can do, the most kind thing I can do to help course correct along the way.
Nice. I'll use that phrase next time. So, you mentioned Tita Tota in your book, and I heard you mention it again. Can you, you don't need to give out everything in the book so that
Sure.
the listeners go to get the book, but can you elaborate on that?
On the teeter-totter?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those.
I like the first explanation you gave, actually.
Yeah, it allows me to approach conversations differently, because here's what happens in most conversations if we're not intentional. When somebody comes to me with an unbalanced teeter-totter where their emotions have gotten the best of them for whatever reason, and it may not be anything I did. It may be they just came from home. Yeah. They got a call from home that got bad news, whatever it is that has imbalanced their teeter-totter. They come at me angry, frustrated, yelling because I'm the one in front of them. I'm not who they're mad at, but I'm the one in front of them. If I don't make an intentional choice, I will meet them with an unbalanced teeter-totter. Their emotions will raise my emotions, and then it's difficult for either of us to recover. They come in yelling and frustrated at me, and I come in, what are you yelling at me for? I haven't done anything to you. And then we just both stay imbalanced. If they come to me and I can tell they're frustrated, even if they're not saying anything, if their physical demeanor tells me, maybe it looks like they've been crying, maybe they won't make eye contact with people, something is telling me that they're not having a great day, then I need to approach them in a balanced way. The other mistake people make is they will approach somebody who's emotional with only logic and reason. And to me, that's one of the problems with American law enforcement today. We have kept emotion out of the situation because logic and reason helps us make good choices, okay? But we forget that we're not logic and reason people. We're emotional people who like to pretend that we make rational decisions.
Yeah.
We make emotional decisions, and then we find a way to rationalize those emotional decisions.
Absolutely.
So I have to approach it balanced, and I have to say they may not be mad at me. Let's see if I can ask some questions, remember what it feels like to be frustrated like them, keep my teeter-totter balanced, and ask them some questions to see if we can't get to what's going on. And if they won't talk to me, because some people are so avoidant of conflict that they won't talk, especially to a supervisor. You just say, listen, I know you're frustrated. If I can do anything to help you, please let me know. If you need to take the day, go take the day. We'll cover for you. But I want to be here to help you if you need me. If not, if you're not comfortable with me helping you, we have things in place that we can get help your way. If it's a coworker or something like that, because they may not feel like talking about it. So you just kind of give them their space, but let them know that you recognized it and that you're on their side if ever they do decide they want some help dealing with whatever's frustrating them.
Wow. It's really funny how you keep hearing things. Everything you've said, I've heard, but with the way you've explained it, and especially with the Tita Tota example, it's made a whole load of difference for me. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. We talk a lot in communication. We talk a lot about building rapport.
Yes.
And for the longest time, when I thought of building rapport, I thought it was just about having a conversation without necessarily, I didn't know anything about connecting or anything like that. I just thought if you exchanged a few words with someone, you had built rapport. How important is building rapport in this whole communication process? And how can we build rapport, really effective rapport?
I love that question because I believe firmly, and one of the things I wrote in the book, we do business at the speed of rapport. That's just what we do, because we only do business with people we like, know, and trust. The only way I can start to know you is if you'll talk with me about stuff outside of work, right? Not about today's deadline or things we're supposed to do today, but maybe you greet me in the morning and say, hey, how was your weekend? Or we just came out of the holiday season. What was the best thing that happened to you over the holidays? You don't have to be super specific. It's actually better if you don't. What was your favorite thing that happened over the last 2 weeks? That's just a 3 or 4 minute conversation. And then if they ask you, you reciprocate. Well, what happened to me was this, and you're sharing something from outside of work. It starts to build the fact that they know you. And then you're sharing an experience, so they start to like you more. And the more they like and know you, the more they'll trust you. And that can be with your customers. When your customer calls you with a problem, they're probably up here. Their teeter-totter is imbalanced because they've had an issue with your product or your service, and they've called you about it. So you just listen, let them vent, and then you share a similar experience you had, and you tell them, hey, that should not have happened to you. And my job is to make sure this doesn't happen to you again or people in the future. You're saying that you've been wronged, and we're going to make it right. You're building rapport. You're not saying something, you're not reading a script from your computer. That drives me crazy when tech support people are saying, I'm so sorry this happened to you, Mr. Harvey, and they're typing into their computer the whole time. You're not sorry, right? You're not sorry because you're really not even talking to me. You're reading a script. I actually called Apple tech support. I'm a huge Apple person. I have Mac computers, an iPhone, all of that. I called them one day and told them the problem I was having with my MacBook. And the guy on the other end of the line goes, man, Scott, that really sucks. We're going to fix that. He goes, we're going to fix that today. And I'm like, it does suck. Thank you for using my language. And it's possible I said that to him, but he's basically saying our product should not have acted that way. And my job is to fix it because that's not who we are. Instead of saying, I'm so sorry this happened to you, Mr. Harvey.
Are you sure? Are you sure you did not do? And then they try to make out like you did something wrong to have caused the problem.
Yes. And so we have to build rapport with people. And sometimes if that's a coworker, that may take a long time. It's not a one-time conversation. It is an ongoing thing. When I worked at the police department, I usually, most mornings, had a cup of coffee with my immediate supervisor in his office. It was about a 10 to 15 minute time that we sat and we talked about what the day looked like, what the week looked like. If I was going to be traveling and speaking anywhere, putting in vacation requests, he knew where I was going and what I was doing because he was approving those. But it also was, what'd you and your wife get into over the weekend? How's your son doing in college? Those type of conversations happened. I knew what he was doing. He knew what I was doing. And when I needed correction, I was more likely to course correct because I knew he actually cared for me.
Yeah.
He wasn't just trying to catch me doing wrong. He was trying to get me to do better because he knew I could. So that relationship, I would have done anything for that supervisor. And he didn't abuse that. He course corrected when I needed it. But most of the time was what's going on this weekend? What's the movie you saw? Something like that.
Nice. So what would you say would be the barriers to effective communication?
Yeah, I think, we've talked about fear. That's obviously a barrier to effective communication. Yeah. The other one is stress, as illustrated by the teeter-totter. I mean, we just came out of this global pandemic. We've all been running around with our teeter-totter. I was going to say
stress. Everyone is stressed.
Everybody is stressed. And the research in the US is saying right now about 90% of our population is experiencing symptoms of anxiety, depression, or panic, like 90%. But the rest of that statistic is almost half of those people don't want to ask for help because they see it as a weakness. So 90% of us are dealing with something that 50% of us don't even want to talk about. So once again, we're suffering in silence.
Yeah, and right? No communication, and the silence is killing.
It is literally killing people. There are people literally taking themselves out of this world because they're afraid to admit that they got something. OMU, I don't know how it was where you are, but when people here got COVID, they posted about it online. They talked about their symptoms. They shared their experience with their friends and family. And what that did for those of us who had yet to experience it is it showed us, yeah, this is going to be a miserable week or so. But there's another side to it. I can make it through this. Now, we all know people who didn't, and that's a tragedy, but that's also the exception, right? When I contracted COVID, I was like, my friends have posted about this. I know what to expect, so it's not as scary. When we
Yes.
are dealing with anxiety and depression and things like that, and nobody's talking about it, it makes us think there's not another side to it.
Like you're alone.
Yeah, like you're alone and you're weak because everybody else has their life together, because on social media, I'm seeing their highlight reel, like all of their wins, none of their tragedies, right?
Absolutely.
And it bothers me that stress and fear and all of that is keeping us from having healing conversations. When a couple years ago, when we were dealing with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and those tragedies, I purposefully sought out my Black friends because I said, I don't know your experience. And they're like, I've never been a police officer. I said, let's sit down, have coffee and learn from each other because I don't have your lens, right? They said, I don't have yours. So I wanted to know, and I wanted to have a potentially difficult conversation because I didn't want to unintentionally hurt people out of my ignorance. So I said, please tell me your experience. When I was dealing with panic attacks in the midst of the pandemic for the first time in my life, I sought out my friends who had dealt with that, and it normalized it. And it showed me that it's something that people experience. I just hadn't experienced it.
Yeah.
And so we can learn from people. And I had some friends of mine that said, because I did a podcast about having difficult conversations during that season of racial unrest. Some of my friends said, I think it's rude that you sought out your Black friends. I said, well, let me tell you this. If I had a financial problem in my business, I'm going to my financial friends because they have the knowledge that I need. Okay. I don't know what I don't know. So tell me, because I don't want to unintentionally offend people out of ignorance. Right. And so I will always seek out uncomfortable conversations because I've always left them on the other side better. Now, in the middle of that conversation, where there's some things that I heard that I had possibly done that were hurtful. Yes. Okay. But I didn't know they were hurtful because I didn't have their lens, right? And my oldest daughter got married 3 months ago. Back in September. She got married 3 months ago to an incredible guy, super thrilled with my son-in-law, who happens to be Black. And so I told my daughter, I said, listen, I don't have a lens for what the world is going to do to you all. But I do know that Rod and Rachel, some great friends of mine, are very similar to you all in their situation. I would love for you to go and have dinner with them so that they can tell you, somebody who's further down the road you're on, so they can tell you, this is what we experienced, this is how we dealt with it, and this is how we made a strong marriage in a world that may not want us to succeed. I don't have a lens for that, OMU. So I said, as your dad, I love you enough to point you to the people who are having the experiences that you all are getting ready to have. And I want them to help guide you down this pathway. Go and seek out people who are further down the road you're traveling, and your road just got a lot easier.
That is a very, very good way to look at it. Very good way to look at it, and very good way to handle it as well. It's important to learn from people who have gone down that same road, actually.
Yes.
So that's very good. So off the top of your head, or with your experience, what would you say are the best ways to communicate today? Because I ask you this because personally, I think that modes of communication and the ways we communicate, the ethics, it has since changed and evolved, and even more post-COVID.
Yes.
So what would you say are the best ways to communicate effectively?
So here's one of the things we learned in the pandemic. We thought going into the pandemic, we wanted a virtual world. We thought we wanted to just order food on our phone, make appointments on our phone, have phone conversations that look like the one we're having, video conversations. We thought that's what we needed. And especially my teenage daughter, who at the start of the pandemic was 14, 15 when this started, she thought that's what she wanted until she was locked in a house with just her family. And then she realized, I need more than this, right?
Yeah.
I need to, and she's an introvert. She loves her alone time, but she also realized I'm a social creature who needs to be in the same room with people. We had a lot of Zoom happy hours, Zoom game nights, all the Zoom things we did with family during the pandemic to stay in touch. But there's just no substitute for being in the same room.
I agree with you.
If you can get in the same room, that is priority one, okay? If you can't, a video conference is the second best. Now, it's second best, it's pretty far into second. And I have to convince the 20-somethings that I work with because they think virtual is the same as in person. It's just not. That's all they've ever known, right? This is a thing they've come to out of ignorance.
Exactly.
So they don't know the power of being in the room. If you and I were in the room after this interview over a cup of coffee, we would solve all the world's problems because we wouldn't be rushed. When I attend conferences in person, it's not the stage stuff that changes my life as much as it is the people I sit with, the conversations in the hallways, over the meals. So get in the same room. If you can't, video conference. If you can't video conference, a telephone call. Old school, talking to them on the phone, not texting, will at least allow you to hear their tone of voice.
Yeah.
If I'm in a video conference or in the same room, I get tone, nonverbals, and those things that we don't pick up unless we're breathing the same air, right? Over the phone, I can at least communicate tone. So let's say I'm running late to an event. Instead of sending a text to the person, my plane was delayed. Instead of texting them, I call them. And I say, my plane's been delayed, but I'm renting a car and I'm coming your way. I'm just going to be a little bit late, doing everything I can to get there. Instead of a text that says, plane canceled, running late, now they're panicked, right? But in my tone of voice, I've communicated to them, I'm going to solve this problem and we're going to still do the show, right?
Yeah.
If you can't get on the phone, an email, text message can communicate bits of information, but you will never build a relationship over text or over an email. I send out emails all the time in my business. I've never had a client say, I'm so thankful for your email, right? It changed my life. But what the email does, even if they don't open it, because we worry about our open rates all the time.
Yeah.
Donald Miller says, as long as they don't unsubscribe, they're still your people.
Absolutely.
They delete your email.
I still see you. Even if I don't open it, I'll still see, oh, Scott Harvey, he's still here.
Correct. And when you have a problem that you know I can help with, I'm your guy.
I'll go to search and I'll search Scott.
Yes. So we don't build a relationship over email. We build a relationship when we serve each other face to face, right? When I come to your event and speak, or I come to your company and train your employees on communication, that's when we build a relationship. And that happens because I've made deposits in the email and stuff. So it's the face to face that really is the best way to communicate. Absent of that, we go down the list to virtual, to phone call, and to text only communication.
Oh, nice, nice. I've actually enjoyed this, and we're almost wrapping up. I want to ask one more question that has actually, I'm really curious to know. How did, or is it still, how did working for the police, or has working for the police, maybe I should put it like that, has working for the police influenced or helped certainly shaped who you are as a person? Now, I mean, shaping your entrepreneurial life now. Yeah. Because, they're like two opposite sides.
It seems that way from the outside, but let me show you how they're more similar than you think. And I got into police work, as I said in the beginning, to help people, okay? And I thought that was going to look one way, and I found out I can help more people if I do it this way, if I get on the prevention end. I really don't want to come to your business after you've had a communication crisis, because cleanup is messy, and we will never get things back to where they were before the crisis. I would much rather come and train your employees prior to a crisis so that one, we can prevent the crisis, or two, lessen the impact because we've communicated our way through. So policing has shown me that there's a lot of different ways to help people and a lot of different ways to get involved and make people better tomorrow than they were today. At the police department, unfortunately, we got called mostly after the tragedy. And we did everything we could to help people rebuild afterwards. But at the same time, we had other people that needed our services. So I got into the prevention end of it to try to diminish the emergencies, teach people how to make better choices so that they don't end up in a ditch on the side of the road or addicted to drugs or in an abusive relationship. Those are the things that I tried to teach people better decision making. And that's exactly what I'm doing today, is teaching people better decision making.
Wouldn't you say that's where empathy comes from? Or that's the empathic side of you is at play there?
Yeah, I think, I am a relatively empathetic person. I feel like that's my nature, but anybody can learn these skills. We live in a world that wants to label us, I am an ENFP, or I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, or whatever you're labeled. I'm a cat, I'm a dog, I'm a lion, whatever test you just took that labeled you. And we want to say, well, that's how I'm made. Just get over the rest. That's not necessarily true. Some people think you're either a good communicator or you're not. I would say you're either communicating effectively or you haven't learned how to communicate effectively. We're all capable of this. We just haven't realized how much it can impact our career, the way we influence people, and those we love the most. Because when I teach people how to raise their communication levels, they're not only better at work. I honestly don't care if it helps them at work. I want to make them a better husband, a better mom, a better dad, a better brother, sister, friend. Because if they're better in those areas because they're communicating more effectively, they will naturally be better at work. Because we don't treat people one way at home and treat them a completely different way at work.
Absolutely.
Because, and one of these days when my family is giving my eulogy, I don't want them to stand up in front of my friends and family and say, Scott was an amazing entrepreneur. I want them to say, Dad loved us. And he loved us so much that he traveled around to help other people communicate more effectively so their kids could feel the love that we felt in our house.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
That's what I want. And if it makes you better at work, that's a bonus, right?
That is powerful. In conclusion, how can my listeners get a copy of this book?
So right now it's in pre-order to the public. So it launches April the 18th. So they can order online, Amazon, whatever their favorite bookseller is. But they can also go to silencekillsbook.com. That's the landing page for this book. They can watch a promo video, like a 2 to 3 minute video that will tell them about the book. And they can order a copy today because I have copies from the publisher that I can sell prior to the April 18th release. Some people are super loyal to their bookseller, and I would say go order it from your bookseller. If you want to wait till, because I pre-order books all the time, OMU. On a Tuesday, sometimes a book shows up I forgot I ordered. And then I'm all excited. It's like Christmas. I'm like, oh, good, a new book. If that's you, go to your favorite bookseller. If you can't wait until April, go to silencekillsbook.com and you can order it directly from there. You can also see all the things about it, read about it, and make a decision before you buy.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Scott. I'm sure that everyone is going to grab this copy, a copy of this book. I certainly would love to read it again. It is a must read. It's been an amazing time talking with you, and I'm sure that my listeners will get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way to get in touch with me is speakingofharvey.com is my website. That's the name of my company, speakingofharvey.com, but I'm also super easy to find on all the social media channels. But if you go to speakingofharvey.com, there's buttons on there for my social media. I'd love to have you connect and let me know how I can help you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Harvey. I'll be the first person to go on there.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So that was called Harvey. Make sure you get in touch with him and buy the book. I've read a bit of the book, and trust me, it's a must read. And to you guys, if you want to watch his face and his expressions, and you want to watch him explaining the Tita Tota, then go on to YouTube, to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and you can watch him there. Take care. See you next Friday. I'm out. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thrive with OMU Podcast. This is your host, Omu Obilo.